Our coverage of the Supreme Court nomination hearing for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Senate Judiciary Committee members are taking turns asking Judge Jackson about her record, family, and interpretation of the Constitution. Today marks the final day of questioning before the senators have an opportunity to make their cases to confirm or reject President Biden's nomination. If confirmed, Judge Jackson would become the first Black woman to sit on the highest court of the United States. Earlier, she addressed the importance of having a more inclusive and diverse judicial branch.
When people see that the judicial branch is comprised of a variety of people who have taken the oath to protect the Constitution and who are doing their best to interpret the laws consistent with that oath, it lends confidence that the rulings that the court is handing down are fair and just, that everything has been considered, that no one is being excluded because of a characteristic like race or gender or anything else. And that's important.
CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson joins us now for more on this. Hi, Jessica. So what stands out the most to you so far in this second round of questioning by the senators?
I think what stands out to me is that we see a lot of themes continue from yesterday, and that we see Judge Jackson really continuing on this theme of, let me tell you what the role of a judge is. And she's doing that, I think, both to support herself, but also to defend herself against Republican attacks of, well, why did you do this? Or why won't you answer this? So the Republicans are doing something that's interesting, where they want her to weigh in on, in my view, a number of policy or political issues, which no Supreme Court nominee would. But then they're careful to say, and we're worried that you would be basically a politician on the court, that you would be a politician in a robe. And she's being very careful over and over again to use words like, I want to stay in my lane. That's not my purview. And we see this continuing throughout the day of her explaining what judges can do, what judges can't do. Another kind of the last thing that stood out for me is she's really excellent at explaining case law and explaining what trial court judges do and appellate court judges do.
Okay, so we saw Judiciary Committee Chairman Richard Durbin bring up free speech and social media regulation as part of a question on applying the Constitution to contemporary issues. So let's start. I want to play you a little bit of what Senator Durbin had to say.
If more people are relying on Facebook and Twitter, for example, for information than they are common sources of television and newspapers, how do we rationalize that they can say, Facebook and Twitter, to a former president of the United States, you can't publish here. You're not going to be allowed to do it, and they've done that. So how do you reconcile that conflict of the changing times, the dramatic changes in technology, what the Founding Fathers envisioned and what we face today?
So I don't know if you were aware of Judge Jackson's response. Did you see that, and what did you make of it?
I did see that, and I actually thought it created one of her more meaningful answers, which is it allowed her to explain what Supreme Court justices do and how she would go about tackling the job of a Supreme Court justice, which is, of course, really the only thing we should all be concerned about here. And she said that the Constitution provides guideposts, essentially, and or older statutes that were enacted before the internet provide us with these basic kind of maps, but they don't create bright line rules. They don't define everything. And so she went about explaining how you would use an old law, whether it be a provision of the Constitution or amendment of the Constitution or an older statute, and how you would read into that changing circumstances. And I'm going to paraphrase this here, but she acknowledged, yes, this is a great question. It's something absolutely judges are going to have to tackle. And she explained what you look at to try and determine that you're doing faith to what either the framers or those who drafted the amendment or those who drafted the statute would want, even if they couldn't envision a world where everybody has basically a computer, a video, and a camera. in their pocket. And I thought that was maybe one of the most insightful exchanges in terms of her, she says methodology, not philosophy, but in terms of her methodology.
So taking a step back, Jessica, and looking overall at the 2 days of questioning we've seen so far, how successful would you say Judge Jackson has been at sort of, not deflecting necessarily, but moving the talking points away from some of the criticisms that Republican senators are trying to levy on her that may or may not have any actual bearing on her sort of judicial career, let's say? How successful has she been at sort of steering the talking points into a place where she can discuss her actual work?
So I think, frankly, it's been a bit mixed. There are moments where you see Senate Republicans take her on this theme that she's soft on crime, I think in part because she'd be the first former federal public defender on the Supreme Court. We've heard a lot about this idea that she's soft on those who violate child pornography, criminal statutes. And I think in some cases, she's been effective in either defending herself or explaining why something's been taken out of context or why she actually can't answer that because it's an issue that might come before her. In other situations, I've actually seen that some of the senators, I thought, fact-checked their colleagues and or rehabilitated her, frankly, better than she did. I think there were some moments where she maybe could have made the point more clearly, more forcefully, and you see her thinking so carefully about every word, where to put basically every comma, semicolon. And in terms of moving the conversation back, I think she's trying to keep the conversation at a place where she's just talking about the constitutional structure and how she fits into that structure. And she's been given some, softballs. Tell me about your family. Tell me about why this position is important to you. I think she's been mixed when it comes to some of those responses.
Fascinating events, as always, during hearings like this on Capitol Hill. Jessica Levinson, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you.